This video is all about the much anticipated Canon EOS R6 Mark II. That's right, the R6 Mark II. We've got lots of specifications on this new camera that will be coming out, including having a larger image sensor. But will it have a CF Express Type B card slot? Details coming up. But first, I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you're kept informed on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. When I published a story about the Canon EOS R8, which was rated as a CR1 by Canon Rumors, many thought it sounded more like what you'd expect to see in the Canon EOS R6 Mark II and not the R8. Well, if that's what you thought, you certainly weren't far off. And in that video that I posted just a couple of days ago, one of the things I said is a story like this, while only being a CR1, it's going to create a lot of noise in the supply chain. It's going to create a lot of noise with Canon Rumors contacts. And what I thought we'd see very shortly is an update, a clarification on the specifications. And that's what we got this morning. First up in the specifications is the sensor size. The R6 had a 20 megapixel sensor, and when this camera first came out, there were quite a few people groaning about 20 megapixels at a $2,500 camera. It's ridiculous. People weren't too happy with it, but a lot of people did look at this camera and see it as a mini 1DX Mark III. It was powerful. It had the same Digic-X image processor. It could produce 12 frames per second mechanical, 20 frames per second electronic. It was a true powerhouse. But one takeaway from this camera was 20 megapixels is just not enough. Well, Canon's heard you. The R6 Mark II is going to have a 24 megapixel sensor. And that's all we know about the sensor. It's going to be 24 megapixels. But if you're thinking what I'm thinking, yeah, the R3, it also has a 24 megapixel sensor. What if Canon is taking that same sensor and putting it in the R6 Mark II? That would be huge. We'd be able to push an awful lot more bandwidth because guess what? Unlike the R6 being or not being BSI or stacked, the R3 is. It would be a huge boom for performance, and Canon Rumors is thinking the same. So how fast can the R6 Mark II shoot continuous? Well, the R6 can shoot 12 frames per second mechanical and 20 frames per second electronic. And the specifications from Canon Rumors, again, this is a CR3, tells us 12 frames per second mechanical. But electronic, and this is where I'm really wondering what the power is like in this camera. If it does have the same sensor as the R3, let's take a look at the R7 and the R10. The R7 can shoot 30 frames per second electronic, 23 frames per second electronic in the R10. Those are far more affordable cameras. To be able to push between 23 and 30 frames per second, and keep in mind the sensor there is higher. It's at around 30 megapixels. That's a big deal. So this camera with 24 megapixels, with the same Digic-X image processor, with a new processor, and if it's the one from the R3, I wouldn't be surprised to see a boost, but there's nothing in these leaked specifications about that. Oh, and one other thing, of course, the R6 is going to have IBIS, embody image stabilization, 5-axis. We don't know how many stops of stabilization it's going to have, but I suspect it's going to be around 5 stops. Not a lot has changed in terms of the video modes. We still have 4K, 24, 25, and 30 frames per second. We also have 50 and 60 frames per second. The R6 was a rather strange camera. It would do 4K 30, but with an oversampled at 5.1K oversampled 4K, but it would always overheat. There wasn't a 4K 30 uncropped mode that wouldn't overheat. Well, the R6 Mark II can do 4K 30 uncropped and 4K 50 and 60 frames per second cropped. Now, we don't know what that's going to be. The R6 had a 1.1 times crop, so the R6 Mark II potentially could have the same. But we don't have a lot of information here. This doesn't really tell us too much about the camera. But here's one thing I really do suspect. As we've seen with the R6, the R7, and the R3, all cameras released after the R5 and the R6, that 30-minute record limit has disappeared. And record times are considerably longer. So I would expect that 30-minute record limit to be gone from this camera. And along with being able to do 4K 30 uncropped, I think we're going to see 6K oversampled 4K. After all, it's going to be a 24 megapixel sensor, right? So 6K oversampled 4K, and it's going to have Canon Log 3. And along with Canon Log 3, it's going to have HDR-PQ. I personally love Canon Log 3. When I got the R5, it had Canon Log 1, and Canon Log 3 was, well, it was provided in a firmware update shortly thereafter, probably some 3 or 4 months later. And I hated it. I hated Canon Log 1. It was so frustrating to use. Every time I shot with it, I found myself pulling my hair out. And as you can see, I don't have an awful lot left. Yes, I was new to this, and yes, I was learning, but even now when I go back to Canon Log 1, I find it very frustrating to color balance and color grade. Whereas Canon Log 3, as soon as it came out, I started using it, and wow, it was like the clouds parted and the sun was shining right down on me at 75 degrees or 23 degrees Celsius, and I just felt warm, I felt great, I felt empowered. I love Canon Log 3, so having Canon Log 3 in this camera is absolutely a necessity. There we go. This is my second video today already. I've actually taken today off because there's so much news coming out, so I can actually take the time to do these videos properly. So necessity, not necessarily. No surprises that the Canon EOS R6 Mark II is going to have dual pixel autofocus, the latest version that we got updates on the R5 and the R6. So that's really good news that we're going to have that dual pixel autofocus Mark II. No real surprises there, but I know the one thing you're waiting for. When I talked about the Canon EOS R6 just a couple of days ago, one of the specifications that we got from Canon Rumours, and again, this was a CR1, is it would have dual card slots. That's not really a surprise because, well, at certain price points, we do see dual card slots, like the R6 has dual UHS-2 card slots. The R8 was supposed to have one CF Express Type B card slot and one UHS-2 card slot. Not like the Sony cameras where they're interchangeable, but still a CF Express Type B card slot. And I thought, well, this is a little bit strange. I can't see Canon doing this because the R6, which costs more and will cost more than the R8, the R6 Mark II, it's going to have dual card slots, but they're going to be dual UHS-2 card slots. No CF Express Type B. So what that tells me is the CR1 specifications that we have for the Canon EOS R8, we can completely cross out CF Express Type B card slots. And based on how the rest of that information lines up almost identical to what we're seeing in the Canon EOS R6 Mark II, I think we can completely cross out any sort of validity in that post. Now, I do suspect it's going to do 4K. It's going to do 4K 24, 25, and 30 frames per second. We're talking about the R8. And most likely it will do 4K 60. Will it do 24, 25, and 30 frames per second? Will it have a crop? We don't really know about that, but I think it's safe to say that what we had on the R8, we can pretty well just say, you know what, it's conjecture. There's nothing reliable there. But the R6 Mark II, it's rated as a CR3. So when Canon Rumours puts something out as a CR3, what they're saying is it's coming from known sources, multiple known sources, and it's been validated. And that's a big deal. Now, we can't treat this as fact because until Canon announces something, anything can change. In fact, everything we hear here can be true. It can actually come from Canon. It can be the actual camera. But until they release it, anything can change. They can even just say, you know what, let's cancel that camera, let's pull it back. Do you remember the Canon 5D Mark V? You're thinking I'm crazy, right? There was no Canon 5D Mark V, but there was. Canon was working on this camera before, well, 2020 hit. The 5D Mark V was planned to come out, and we had rumors about this. We know Canon was working on it, as well as several other cameras, but they canceled it. And we can see anything happening. Now, I don't see Canon canceling the R6 Mark II. And for some reason, throughout this video, I keep trying to say M6 Mark II, and hopefully I haven't left any errors in. Each time I said it, I had to go back and reshoot that particular moment, that scene. But a CR3, that tells us that this camera is coming, and what we're hearing here as specifications are pretty much baked in. We're looking at 80% of what we would expect to see on an announcement. There's also an awful lot of details that we're not seeing here. What about dynamic range? What about ISO, low light performance? And of course, the number of frames per second continuous shooting in electronic mode. There's an awful lot that we don't know here yet. And what else we don't know? Well, we don't know the price, but we also don't know when this is supposed to be coming out. It's a CR3. When we usually get a CR3, the actual camera announcement is usually anywhere up to a year. So this camera could come out next year. It could be announced in the spring. It could be the first half of 2023. We just don't know. But an announcement this year, here in 2022, we're already in the middle of October? I don't really think so. I think if we were supposed to get that announcement this year, this would be in the CR3. We'd have something in there. But Canon Rumours has gone ahead and told us that more information is going to come out soon. So if you want to know the latest on the Canon EOS R6 Mark II, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, followed by clicking on all notifications. By clicking on all notifications, as soon as I publish a new video like this one here, you'll get notified by YouTube. And that saves you from having to search out and read all the latest RSS feeds, Twitter feeds, following all those favorite websites of yours, as well as YouTube channels. I cover all the major news from all the camera platforms, I don't cover all the really tiny stuff, but all the major news is covered. And by subscribing and choosing all notifications, you can stay up to date on the latest camera news and rumors. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again later on today.